Before we begin, if you think monsters hide in dark alleys, think again. Some of them drive 18-wheelers. Some of them wave at gas station clerks. Some of them cross state lines every night without anyone noticing. And sometimes they don't get caught for decades. If you're interested in real crime investigations, FBI profiling, and the psychological patterns behind serial offenders, subscribe now, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a case file, and this one almost never closed. File reference: internal, multi-state homicide pattern. Status: closed. Primary subject: long-haul commercial driver. Estimated victims: 50 plus. The first body was found outside Amarillo, Texas. Unidentified female, late 20s. Cause of death: strangulation. No witnesses, no clear timeline, no suspect. The case was filed under transient homicide, meaning likely a drifter, likely drug-related, low priority. It shouldn't have been. Over the next 5 years, bodies appeared along interstates: Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Illinois, Tennessee. Each case investigated locally, each one disconnected, different jurisdictions, different detectives, different filing systems. No one saw the pattern because no one was looking across state lines. Victimology report: early phase. Gender: female. Age range: 19 to 38. Occupation: often unstable employment. Location of recovery: within 10 miles of major highway. Personal belongings: missing. No signs of prolonged captivity, no defensive wounds in most cases, minimal forensic trace. Which meant one thing: the offender was experienced, or mobile, or both. The turning point came in 2007. Kansas State Patrol flagged a pattern: 3 similar homicides within 18 months. All near truck stops, all within 2 miles of Interstate 70. The FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, VICAP, was notified. That changed everything. VICAP does one thing well: it sees patterns where humans don't. Once the Kansas files were uploaded into the national database, matches began to surface. Texas, Oklahoma, Indiana, same ligature marks, same post-mortem positioning, same geographic proximity to freight corridors. Now the word serial entered the conversation, quietly, internally. Behavioral Analysis Unit, preliminary profile. Gender: male. Age: likely 35 to 55. Occupation: job requiring frequent interstate travel. Socially functional. Organized offender, comfortable approaching strangers, above average impulse control. And the key indicator: access to highways without suspicion, which narrowed it dramatically: long-haul trucking. At first, investigators hesitated. There are over 3.5 million truck drivers in the United States. You don't just accuse an industry, you need proof. But then came a breakthrough: a survivor. In 2009, a woman in Indiana reported an attempted assault. She had been picked up near a truck stop. The driver offered food, conversation, a ride to a safer location. She sensed something wrong when he avoided well-lit exits. She jumped from the moving vehicle at low speed. She survived. Her description was vague: white male, mid-40s, calm demeanor, company-branded truck. But one detail stood out. He had a tattoo on his left wrist, an eagle. Now investigators had something physical, a marker. Still thin, but real. The FBI began cross-referencing trucking employment records with arrest history, interstate route frequency, presence near crime scenes, vehicle GPS logs, known tattoos. One name surfaced repeatedly, but not because he stood out, because he didn't. Clean driving record, no violent convictions, stable employment, divorced once, 2 adult children, 30 years on the road, no red flags, which made him dangerous. He understood invisibility, he understood routine, he understood geography, and most importantly, he understood how jurisdictional fragmentation works. If a body is found in Missouri, and another in Oklahoma, and another in Arkansas, Local departments don't always communicate effectively. He wasn't random, he was strategic. From 1998 to 2010, freight data showed he drove an average of 110,000 miles a year. That's over 1.3 million miles. That's more than 5 trips around the Earth. He could commit a crime in one state and be 800 miles away by morning. Alibi by distance. Investigators needed forensic connection, and they found it in something small: fibers. Synthetic upholstery fibers found on 3 separate victims in different states. Lab comparison showed consistent polymer composition, rare manufacturing batch, used in a specific series of truck cabin seats produced between 1996 and 2001, narrowing the vehicle pool significantly. Now they had vehicle type, tattoo identifier, route alignment, victim proximity, survivor description. The net tightened. Undercover agents began visiting truck stops along his frequent routes, watching, listening, waiting. They didn't confront him, they studied him. He was polite, reserved, paid cash, avoided bar conversations, never stayed longer than necessary, routine-driven, predictable in unpredictability. The arrest didn't happen because of a dramatic chase. It happened because of data. GPS logs placed him within 5 miles of 7 homicide scenes, timestamps aligned with estimated death windows. That's not coincidence, that's pattern. A federal warrant was issued. He was arrested at a way station in Colorado. No resistance, no panic, just one question. Is this about the girls? That was the first confession, not detailed, not emotional, but revealing. Inside the truck cabin, investigators found ligature curials, personal items from victims, newspaper clippings about unidentified bodies, maps with small pen marks, 52 marks. Some investigators believe not all were confirmed victims, which means the number may never be exact. During interrogation, he remained calm, detached, clinical. He described his victims as temporary. He referred to the crimes as episodes. No rage, no dramatic hatred, just compulsion mixed with opportunity. That's what makes organized offenders terrifying. They don't look like monsters. They look like men you'd ask for directions. Psychological evaluation indicated antisocial personality traits, lack of empathy, high cognitive functioning, emotional compartmentalization. He separated work, family, violence, 3 worlds, no overlap. That mental separation allowed him to function for over a decade undetected. In 2013, he pled guilty to multiple counts to avoid death penalty litigation. Federal sentencing, life imprisonment without parole. No media theatrics, no courtroom outbursts, just silence. What made this case shocking wasn't just the number, it was the mobility, the invisibility, the systemic blind spots. The trucking industry isn't criminal, but mobility creates anonymity. Anonymity creates opportunity. Opportunity in the wrong mind becomes violence. Since this case, the FBI has created specialized task forces monitoring highway corridor crimes, transient victim patterns, multi-state linkage analysis. Data sharing improved, technology improved, but the lesson remains. Patterns hide in plain sight, especially when they cross borders. This wasn't just a killer, it was a systems failure. Jurisdiction gaps, delayed data entry, under-prioritized victims, transient lifestyle stigma. When victims are labeled low risk, cases become low priority, and predators know that. If you made it this far, understand something important. This story isn't about fear, it's about awareness. Real crime investigations aren't solved by instinct, they're solved
After the
by
arrest,
patterns.
the real
And this
work
one
began.
took over a
Catching
decade.
him was only
Subscribe
step
if you
one.
want deeper
Proving
FBI
50
file
murders
breakdowns,
across
because the
multiple
next
states,
case might
that was
be
something
hiding
else
in plain
entirely.
sight.
Because suspicion is not conviction, and patterns are not evidence. Interrogation room, day 1. He sat upright, hands folded, no visible anxiety, no trembling, no denial. When agents asked why, he didn't say anger, he didn't say trauma, he didn't blame victims. He said something chillingly simple. I didn't plan them. They just happened. But that wasn't true, because forensic reconstruction showed preparation. Always preparation. Ligature stored in same compartment. Gloves pre-positioned. Truck cleaned methodically. Personal items removed. That's not spontaneous. That's ritual. The Behavioral Analysis Unit revisited his childhood history. Nothing dramatic on record. No severe abuse, no early violent arrests, no psychiatric institutionalization. But there were indicators. Isolation tendencies. Documented cruelty to animals reported by a neighbor at age 14. Never prosecuted. Expulsion from school for stalking behavior. Pattern of short-lived relationships. And one consistent theme: control. He preferred environments where he dictated the terms. Long-haul trucking gave him that. Alone, unsupervised, mobile, untraceable in real time, at least in the late 90s. The road became both workplace and hunting ground. How he selected victims. Victimology Deep Dive revealed something important. He didn't target randomly. He targeted predictability. Truck stops, rest areas, motels along freight corridors, areas known for transient activity. He approached women who appeared alone, often offering food, warmth, conversation, temporary help. Not force, not threat. Charm. Because charm lowers resistance faster than intimidation, and he understood that. A key pattern emerges. Investigators mapped his freight routes over 12 years, overlaying delivery schedules, cell tower pings, fuel receipts, toll booth timestamps. Then they overlaid homicide recovery sites. The overlap was staggering. Clusters formed like constellations across interstate highways: Interstate 40, Interstate 70, Interstate 80, freight arteries. He used America's infrastructure as camouflage. Digital forensics breakthrough. In 2005, his trucking company installed early GPS tracking in fleet vehicles. At the time, it was meant for fuel efficiency, not crime prevention, but archived logs were still stored. Forensic analysts reconstructed old route data. In at least 9 confirmed cases, his truck idled within 1 mile of recovery sites, within relevant time windows. That moved the case from behavioral theory to prosecutable reality. Interrogation room, day 4. Agents shifted strategy. Not accusation, not confrontation, rapport. They discussed weather, road fatigue, loneliness. He relaxed, and then he said something revealing. Out there, no one sees you. You're just passing through. That was his worldview. People were temporary. Places were temporary. Consequences felt temporary. Mobility distorted permanence. The map with 52 marks. Inside his cabin, investigators recovered a laminated U.S. highway map, tiny pen dots scattered along major freight routes. When compared with unsolved homicide database entries, 31 aligned closely, but 21 marks did not, which meant either unidentified victims, unreported cases, or aborted attempts. The true number may never be confirmed, and that uncertainty still unsettles investigators today. Why he went undetected for so long. This wasn't brilliance, it was systemic weakness. Before national database integration improvements, local departments rarely cross-referenced out-of-state transient cases. Victims labeled as runaways, sex workers, drug users, unidentified migrants. These classifications reduced urgency, and predators understand which victims generate less institutional response. That's not a conspiracy, it's a statistical reality. Media blackout. For nearly a decade, there was no national coverage because there was no single headline, just scattered tragedies. Different counties, different names, different paperwork. Serial crime thrives in fragmentation. Once the FBI publicly linked the cases, everything changed. Tip lines exploded. Former coworkers reported strange comments. Ex-partners recalled disturbing behavior. But hindsight is always sharper. The courtroom. He avoided trial. Plea agreement. Life imprisonment without parole. No cameras allowed inside federal sentencing. No dramatic confession speech. When asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, he replied, no. Not apology, not explanation, just absence. Inside federal prison, psychological assessments continued. He displayed low affect, high cognitive empathy, understanding others' emotions without feeling them, compartmentalization. When asked if he felt remorse, he responded, I regret getting caught. That statement was included in internal FBI behavioral training material, not for shock value, for pattern education. The industry response. After the case closed, federal agencies initiated enhanced freight corridor monitoring, stronger interstate homicide linkage systems, improved DNA sharing protocols, and awareness training at truck stops. It's important to state, the overwhelming majority of truck drivers are law-abiding professionals. This case highlighted mobility risks, not occupational guilt. Mobility plus anonymity plus vulnerable victim pools equals opportunity. Opportunity alone does not create violence, but it enables it. What investigators learned: always look across state lines. Don't deprioritize victims based on lifestyle. Data integration saves years. Patterns hide in mobility-heavy professions. Serial offenders adapt to systemic blind spots. The unanswered question: why 50? Why continue for years? Experts concluded the reinforcement cycle. Each successful crime without capture reduces perceived risk. Reduced risk increases frequency. Frequency builds confidence. Confidence lowers caution. He wasn't escalating in brutality, he was escalating in efficiency. That distinction matters in profiling. Final analysis.
After sentencing,
This case wasn't shocking because of theatrics. It was shocking because of normalcy.
From active investigation
He clocked in,
to
delivered
systemic
freight,
evaluation.
filed taxes,
Because when
called
an offender
family, and
operates
killed
for over a
between
decade
state
undetected,
lines.
the
Monsters
question
don't
is not
always
only
isolate
who committed
themselves.
the crimes,
Sometimes
the
they
question
integrate,
becomes,
and
how
that's
did
what
the
makes
system
pattern
allow it?
recognition critical.
The geographic profile. The FBI's geographic profiling unit reconstructed his route history with layered modeling software. They analyzed freight delivery hubs, refueling frequency, rest period compliance logs, highway exit patterns, truck stop loyalty card data. A clear spatial pattern emerged. He avoided major metropolitan police jurisdictions, high surveillance truck stops, densely populated corridors. Instead, he favored mid-sized interstate exits, transitional zones between rural and suburban counties, areas where jurisdictional boundaries were within 10 miles. Why? Because boundary zones dilute investigative responsibility. When a body's found near a county line, procedural coordination slows. That delay was his shield. Behavioral escalation model. Contrary to media myths, not all serial offenders escalate in brutality. In this case, escalation was logistical. Years 1 to 3, opportunistic selection, inconsistent body disposal distance, minimal staging. Years 4 to 7, improved timing, faster execution, reduced trace evidence. Years 8 to 12, precise geographic clustering, fewer physical errors, more calculated interaction windows. He wasn't becoming more violent, he was becoming more efficient. Efficiency is far more dangerous than rage. Interview transcript excerpt redacted. Agent: did you ever think you would be caught? Subject: not really. Agent: why not? Subject: nobody was talking to each other. That sentence became a training case study because it was true. Before integrated homicide databases became standardized nationwide, cross-state linkage relied heavily on manual coordination, and manual coordination fails under volume pressure. Victim impact review.
The FBI Victim Services Division conducted extended outreach to surviving families. One mother described calling 3 different state agencies before someone admitted her daughter's case might be linked. For years, families believed their loved ones were isolated tragedies. They weren't. They were part of a pattern hidden by distance. That emotional fragmentation is one of the most devastating aspects of multi-state serial crime. The families suffer alone until someone connects the dots. Industry blind spots. Investigators examined trucking oversight systems during the 1998 to 2010 period. Key limitations included paper logbooks easily manipulated, limited real-time GPS, minimal background rescreening after hiring, inconsistent interstate data sharing. Again, this was not negligence, it was technological limitation, but predators adapt to technological gaps. He understood that trucking provided legal reason to travel constantly, extended isolation, plausible explanation for irregular hours, and limited oversight across state lines. Mobility gave him operational freedom. The role of routine. One misconception about serial offenders is unpredictability. In reality, routine is common. His freight schedule rarely changed, his refueling stops were consistent, his rest breaks aligned with federal compliance windows. Predictability creates comfort. Comfort reduces suspicion. He blended into an industry built on repetition. Psychological motivation assessment. Clinical evaluators concluded this was not financially motivated, not revenge-driven, not ideologically driven. It was control-oriented compulsion. Key traits identified: emotional detachment, compartmentalized identity, cognitive empathy without affective empathy, low physiological arousal during recounting events. In simple terms, he could understand fear, but he could not feel it. That distinction separates psychopathy from reactive violence. Media disclosure strategy. Federal authorities made a strategic decision not to sensationalize. No dramatic press conference detailing victim counts, no theatrical display of evidence. Why? Because notoriety fuels copycat behavior. Responsible reporting reduces glamorization. The focus remained on the victims, the systemic lessons, and the investigative collaboration. Data integration reforms. After this case, several federal and state reforms accelerated: mandatory entry of all violent crimes into national databases, cross-state task force automation triggers, enhanced highway corridor crime monitoring units, improved DNA backlog processing, federal grants for multi-jurisdiction homicide analysts. The offender exploited fragmentation. Reform focused on integration. Unsolved corridor cases. During post-conviction review, analysts compared his map markings to 112 unsolved corridor homicides between 1995 and 2012. Some were ruled out, some remained inconclusive. Even with confession and forensic linkage, uncertainty persists. That is the haunting part of serial crime. Closure is rarely total. Prison psychological update, Year 3. He remained compliant, no disciplinary infractions, no violent incidents. He reads extensively, avoids media interviews, refuses academic study participation. Why refuse study? Possibly control. Even in confinement, withholding information preserves power. Control did not disappear, it simply shifted context. What made this case different? There have been other long-haul offenders historically, but what distinguished this case was volume plus duration plus mobility plus invisibility. He did not taunt police, he did not leave symbolic signatures, he did not crave attention. He relied entirely on systemic gaps. That makes him a systems predator, not a theatrical one. And systems predators are harder to detect. Behavioral lesson for law enforcement. Serial crime does not always escalate emotionally. Mobility professions require pattern monitoring. Victim lifestyle should never reduce investigative priority. Interstate cooperation must be immediate, not reactive. Data is more reliable than instinct. The larger question, could this happen again? With modern tracking, faster database integration, and advanced analytics, detection would likely occur sooner. But no system is flawless. Technology closes gaps. Human oversight opens others. The balance is ongoing. Closing FBI's summary statement. The official internal assessment concluded the subject leveraged occupational mobility and jurisdictional fragmentation to commit repeated homicides across state lines. Delayed interagency linkage extended operational duration. Post-case reforms have significantly improved detection probability for similar behavioral patterns. Cold language, clinical, but behind that language are lives. 50 confirmed, possibly more. If you've stayed with this file to this point, you now
After
understand
sentencing,
something deeper
analysts
than
returned
headlines.
to the
This was
earliest
not
known
about a
homicide
truck,
connected to
not
the case.
about
But
highways, not
investigators
about
began
spectacle.
asking a
It was
difficult
about
question.
pattern
What
recognition
if
failure and
1998
pattern
wasn't the
recognition
beginning?
correction.
Because serial
True
behavior
crime is
rarely
not just
starts fully
story,
formed.
it is
It
system,
develops,
and
it
systems
rehearses,
must
it
evolve.
evolves. When forensic archives were re-examined, 2 unsolved 1996 corridor deaths showed partial similarities, but degraded evidence prevented confirmation. That uncertainty forced a broader review. Pre-offense indicators. Investigators reconstructed his life timeline from age 18 onward. Early employment records showed frequent job changes, short-term relocation, sudden moves after personal conflicts. Nothing criminal, but unstable patterns. He gravitated towards solitary work long before trucking, warehouse night shifts, rural delivery routes, long-distance courier services. Isolation wasn't accidental, it was preferred. The power of anonymity. Highway culture has its own ecosystem. Truck stops operate as temporary communities. Drivers arrive, rest, fuel, leave. No long-term relational memory. That transience reduces accountability. He understood something simple. If you are always passing through, no one watches closely. He did not stand out. He did not behave erratically. He blended into a system built on movement. Digital footprint retrospective. In later years of his activity, early internet forums were analyzed. Investigators located posts on trucking message boards under an alias. Content themes included complaints about invisible living, discussions about being forgotten on the road, statements about people being temporary. No direct threats, no admissions, but a recurring fixation on disposability. Language analysis software later suggested emotional detachment markers common in high-functioning antisocial personalities. Words matter, even when crimes are not yet visible. Corridor crime pattern modeling. After this case, the FBI developed enhanced predictive modeling for corridor-based violence. Key variables now monitored include repeated unsolved deaths near major freight routes, victim recovery proximity to way stations, patterns of nighttime fuel purchase clusters, multi-state ligature similarity. Data now speaks faster than paper ever could. Had this modeling existed in 2002, the duration of the series might have been cut in half. Interview analysis. Late session. Months into interrogation cooperation, he provided partial admissions, not detailed narratives, but confirmations. When asked how he chose victims, he stated, "They looked like nobody would miss them." That sentence triggered a major training overhaul in victim classification protocols, because the truth is uncomfortable. Predators exploit social invisibility. Victims who appear marginalized receive delayed institutional urgency. That gap was his operational shield. How he maintained double life stability. Colleagues described him as reliable, quiet, never late on duty, never intoxicated on duty. Family described him as emotionally distant, present but detached, as always tired. He avoided emotional intimacy, but maintained surface-level normalcy. Double life maintenance depends on compartmentalization, and he mastered compartmentalization. Work self, family self, predator self, separate identities, never intersecting. Neuropsychological evaluation. Testing revealed normal intelligence range, elevated planning capacity, reduced autonomic stress response during violent recollection. In simple terms, his heart rate barely increased while describing homicide logistics. That physiological calmness is rare. It signals emotional processing deficits consistent with psychopathy spectrum markers. Not all psychopaths kill, but many serial offenders exhibit similar traits. Why he stopped in 2010. Investigators analyzed the abrupt decline in linked cases after 2010. 3 possible factors. Company-installed real-time GPS increased perceived risk, aging reduced physical stamina, psychological satiation threshold temporarily reached. Serial crime is not always linear. It can pause, but pause does not equal reform. He did not seek treatment, he did not self-report urges, he simply reduced frequency until surveillance caught up. National response after public disclosure. When the case became public, trucking associations collaborated with federal agencies. New initiatives included anonymous reporting hotlines for suspicious driver behavior, expanded rest area camera systems, mandatory route log digitalization, cross-state law enforcement intelligence bulletins. The response was structural, because structural crime requires structural correction. The human cost. Behind the numbers were names. Women who disappeared without headlines, families who searched without answers, communities that never knew patterns connected their tragedies. One sister of a confirmed victim stated, "For years, we thought she ran away. We blamed her. We blamed ourselves." That is the secondary damage of multi-state serial crime. It fractures memory. It delays grief. It multiplies confusion. FBI Behavioral Training Update. This case is now part of Advanced Behavioral Analysis Unit coursework under Mobile Organized Offender Profiling. Core teaching points: mobility professions require multi-jurisdiction monitoring. Victim risk assessment must avoid bias. Lack of signature does not equal lack of serial linkage. Efficiency-based escalation is harder to detect than brutality-based escalation. Training evolves because cases teach, and this one taught extensively. The unanswerable element. Even after conviction, investigators acknowledge some map markings remain unexplained, some missing persons cases remain open, some unidentified remains remain unmatched. Total victim count may never be final. That ambiguity is often the most haunting element of serial crime. Closure has limits. Final psychological observation. He did not kill out of chaos. He killed within order. Schedule, route, routine, structure. Structure masked violence, and violence hid inside structure. That paradox is what allowed duration. Systems conclusion. The case ultimately revealed it was not intelligence alone that enabled him. It was mobility, data fragmentation, victim marginalization, technological delay. Once those gaps narrowed, his operational window closed. Closing file entry. Case status, closed by conviction. Additional victims, possible but unconfirmed. Lessons. Integrated data sharing
Years
prevents
after
duration.
conviction, analysts
Recommendation,
reopened early
maintain
police reports from
cross-state violent crime
1998 to
analytics
2003.
indefinitely.
They weren't looking
If
for
you
new
followed
crimes,
this
they were
entire
looking for
file
missed
expansion,
signals.
you now
In several
understand
early
the full
cases, witnesses
architecture
had
of the
reported
case,
a
not
large white
dramatized,
truck parked
not
nearby.
glorified,
But because
documented,
interstate exits
analyzed,
always contain
system
trucks,
corrected.
that detail blended into background noise. In hindsight, it was not noise, it was repetition. The human brain filters common objects. Investigators are trained to look for anomalies, but sometimes the anomaly is frequency, not uniqueness. The role of time windows. One of the most revealing post-case analyses involved time of death estimates. Nearly all confirmed victims were last seen between 8:30 p.m. and 1:15 a.m. Why that window? Because 1. Truck stops are active enough to allow approach without suspicion. 2. Surveillance in the late 90s was limited. 3. Fatigue reduces situational awareness. 4. Night highways allow rapid departure without heavy traffic scrutiny. He did not act randomly. He acted when environmental variables aligned. Serial offenders often rely less on emotion and more on environmental opportunity. Pattern of approach. FBI reconstruction teams interviewed dozens of long-haul drivers to understand cultural norms. Common behaviors include offering directions, sharing route advice, inviting someone to sit inside during cold weather, providing temporary rides between stops. These acts are not inherently suspicious. He exploited normal hospitality. Predators frequently operate inside social expectations. That lowers guard. That increases compliance. Behavioral mirroring. During interrogation, he admitted something subtle. I talked like them, meaning he mirrored speech patterns. If a victim was from the Midwest, he adopted regional phrasing. If she spoke slowly, he slowed. If she appeared anxious, he softened tone. Behavioral mirroring builds rapid trust. This tactic is common in organized offenders. Trust reduces resistance. Resistance reduction reduces physical struggle. Physical struggle increases evidence. He minimized evidence by minimizing resistance. Forensic minimalism. One remarkable feature of the case was lack of excessive staging. He did not leave theatrical displays. He did not position bodies symbolically. He did not communicate with media. This absence of signature delayed linkage. Signature crimes are easier to connect. Efficiency crimes are quieter, and quiet crimes travel further before detection. Family interviews aftermath. Years after sentencing, documentary researchers interviewed extended family members. Most stated, "We never saw violence," but several mentioned, "He disliked being questioned. He avoided emotional vulnerability. He valued control in small domestic decisions." Minor control behaviors often precede larger control-driven pathology, but subtle patterns rarely trigger alarm until hindsight sharpens them. Statistical anomaly analysis. Post-case data scientists created a model asking, if a single long-haul driver commits multi-state homicide, what statistical footprint does that leave? Findings included increased unsolved homicide clustering within 5 to 15-mile bands of primary freight exits, repeated victim discovery near fuel stations open 24/7, temporal gaps aligning with delivery rest windows. These markers are now fed into national analytic monitoring tools. His crimes contributed to algorithm refinement. Psychological theory, the highway effect. Researchers coined a term informally during training discussions, the highway effect. Definition: a psychological state in which constant movement reduces perceived permanence and moral consequence. When individuals spend extended periods in transient environments, emotional attachment to place weakens. For most people, this produces loneliness. For a minority with antisocial traits, it can produce detachment. Detachment reduces empathy. Reduced empathy lowers inhibition. Lower inhibition increases risk-taking. The road did not create him, but it amplified predisposition. Media responsibility review. Journalists debated how to report the case. Should the focus be the number, the occupation, the psychology, the systemic gap? Ultimately, responsible reporting avoided naming him repeatedly because repetition builds notoriety, and notoriety can inspire imitation. The victims' names were prioritized in official releases. That shift reflects evolving true crime ethics. Behavioral stagnation and prison. 5 years into incarceration, psychologists observed no remorse development. Why? Because remorse requires emotional capacity. He demonstrated cognitive understanding of harm, but emotional resonance remained absent. This aligns with primary psychopathic traits. Rehabilitation prospects in such cases are statistically low. Containment becomes primary objective. Unconfirmed Cases Review Board. A federal review board continues examining potential related cases. DNA degradation complicates confirmation. Some remains were never preserved with modern forensic standards, which reveals another lesson. Evidence preservation practices have dramatically improved since the 90s. Past limitations cannot be reversed, but future cases benefit. Societal impact. Beyond law enforcement, the case influenced truck stop security upgrades, interstate camera installations, public awareness about transient vulnerability, and advocacy for missing persons database integration. It shifted conversation from isolated tragedies to systemic vulnerability. Final behavioral synthesis. He was not chaotic. He was organized. He was not explosive. He was methodical. He was not seeking fame. He was exploiting invisibility. Invisibility was his weapon. Not the truck, not the highway. Invisibility. File closure addendum.
3 months
The
after the
FBI
arrest became
internal memo
public, the
closing
Behavioral
extended
Analysis
review stated,
Unit initiated
this case
something
demonstrates the
unusual,
necessity
a
of
copycat
integrated
risk
interstate
assessment.
crime analytics
Whenever a
in
long-running
mobility-heavy
serial
professions.
case becomes
Pattern
national news,
duration was enabled by
analysts evaluate
fragmentation.
the
Future
probability of
prevention
imitation
depends on
crimes,
data unity.
because
Cold
exposure
words,
changes
but
behavior.
they represent evolution.
In this case, several factors were concerning. Highway mobility was accessible, the offender operated for years undetected, the methodology required no advanced weapons, the occupation offered anonymity. Those ingredients can be psychologically attractive to certain unstable individuals. But there was one protective factor. The case emphasized detection through data, not cleverness, not genius. The narrative framed him as someone who exploited gaps and was ultimately exposed by analytics. That framing reduces romanticization, and framing matters. Section: What he didn't do. To understand serial offenders, analysts often focus not only on actions, but omissions. He never contacted media, left written messages, displayed symbolic signatures, revisited crime scenes, publicly inserted himself into investigations. Why does this matter? Because offenders seeking recognition behave differently from offenders seeking control. Recognition-seeking criminals escalate theatrically. Control-seeking criminals escalate quietly. His silence was strategic, and silence travels further before detection. Section: The family blind spot. Investigators interviewed extended relatives under protective confidentiality. Several patterns emerged. He preferred solitude during holidays, he avoided emotional confrontation, he maintained minimal long-term friendships. But none of these are crimes. Millions of people are integrated. The difference lies not in isolation itself, but in emotional absence combined with manipulative functionality. He could simulate normalcy when necessary. That simulation prevented suspicion. Section: Micro-expression review. During interrogation footage analysis, behavioral specialists observed something subtle. When shown victim photographs, no flinch, no jaw tightening, no pupil dilation spike. When shown freight company GPS maps, visible microfrown, increased blink rate. Emotions surfaced around exposure, not around harm. That differential response reveals internal priority structure. His fear centered on detection, not consequence. Section: Transportation industry impact. The trucking industry experienced temporary public scrutiny after the case, but federal crime analysts were careful to emphasize statistical rarity. Out of millions of drivers, a single offender does not define an industry. However, reforms were implemented: enhanced background rescreening intervals, randomized psychological wellness checks in certain fleets, anonymous peer reporting systems. The goal was not suspicion, but early anomaly detection. Section: The data lesson. One of the most important lessons from this file was simple: data must move faster than offenders. Before modern database integration, violent crime records moved manually: paper, fax, delayed uploads. Now, real-time entry, automated pattern detection, interstate alerts. Technology narrowed the operational window, but vigilance must remain continuous. Section: The map revisited.
Years after conviction, forensic imaging enhanced the recovered highway map. Under alternate light sources, investigators discovered faint erased marks beneath visible ones, which meant he adjusted records. He removed dots, possibly representing attempts aborted, possibly representing crimes misremembered. That discovery reinforced one reality: even offenders lose track. Compulsion distorts memory, but documentation preserves truth. Section: Long-term psychological monitoring. In prison, he participates in mandatory behavioral reviews. Findings after several years: no violence inside facility, no disciplinary infractions, minimal social engagement, no emotional progression toward remorse. His psychological state remains stable. Stability in confinement does not equal rehabilitation, it reflects containment. Section: The question of motive. Investigators asked repeatedly, was there a triggering event? Divorce, financial crisis, personal loss? Timeline analysis showed no clear precipitating trauma before the confirmed first homicide, which suggests intrinsic pathology rather than reactive breakdown. Some offenders respond to crisis, others carry latent predisposition that activates under opportunity. He fit the latter profile. Section: How the FBI now scans for similar patterns. Post-case procedural evolution includes corridor homicide clustering software, missing persons cross-state integration, fuel receipt analytics correlation, freight route anomaly modeling. Algorithms now flag multiple unsolved deaths within freight radii, recurrent vehicle types near recovery zones, unusual idling time patterns near desolate exits. Technology closes gaps that once remained invisible. Section: Public misconceptions. Many assume serial offenders are chaotic or visibly unstable. This case demonstrated the opposite. He was routine, predictable, structured, employed, and legally compliant in public spaces. Danger did not manifest in spectacle, it hid in repetition. Section: Lessons for criminal profiling students. This case is now part of advanced federal coursework. Core takeaways: mobility multiplies investigative complexity. Organized offenders minimize trace evidence. Absence of signature complicates linkage. Victim lifestyle bias delays pattern recognition. Efficiency-based escalation can mask duration. Students study this file not for shock, but for systems understanding. Section: The long view. Time reframes cases. Years later, this investigation is remembered less for the number and more for what it exposed: data fragmentation, jurisdictional boundaries, delayed integration. The offender exploited geography. The solution became geography plus analytics. Final reflection. The most unsettling aspect of this file is not brutality, it is normalcy. He did not appear monstrous. He did not announce himself. He did not crave spotlight. He relied on distance, routine, fragmentation, and for years that was enough, until it wasn't.